Okay, guys, I wanted to do kind of a more complicated problem for absolute value and compared to the last one we did. And so in this case, I have an absolute value of x minus 2 equals 4x plus 8. And so you might be going like, okay, yeah, this does look a little weird. And there's a couple of these on your homework. So I wanted to make sure and give you an example. So in this case, it looks different because there's an x over here. But we're still going to follow the same steps. So step 1 says, is the absolute value alone? Is it isolated? And the answer is yes. So in this case, the absolute value has nothing attached to it. There's not like a 3 here or a plus 5. There's nothing attached to it. And so we're actually okay to start and go to the next step because the absolute value is already by itself. Okay? So the second step says to set up the two cases. Okay, so we're going to set up two different cases. And so normally when we do that, we say, okay, the absolute value equals the positive number. And then the second case is the absolute value equals the negative of that. And so we're actually going to do the same thing here. It's just going to look a little different. So our first case, we're going to set it up as is. So the x minus 2 is equal to 4x plus 8. Okay, that's the positive part. It's the same. The second part is we set it up to its negative. So we're going to say, okay, the second case is if x minus 2 equaled the negative of that. Because then if I took the absolute value, it would still be the same. So this negative, though, has to be outside of a parenthesis because it's going to be given to both terms. And so I'm actually going to start with this one first since we're already talking about it. And so since this negative is here, I have to distribute this negative. And so then it changes it to x minus 2 equals negative 4x minus 8. So you negated that side. You did take its negative counterpart, okay? Now we just solve for x. And even though it looks weird, we just need to solve like we were doing last week where you move the variable onto one side and then you solve. So in this case, I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And I'm going to be left with 4x plus x gives me 5x. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get 5x equals negative 6. And then divide both sides by 5. And so in this case, x is equal to a negative 6/5. And I'm going to save that negative 6/5, and check it in a minute. So I'm going to put it up here and save it. So negative 6/5. I'm saving it to check it in a minute. Let's do the other side, though. So the other side looks very similar. We're going to subtract x from both sides. So I'm going to get negative 2 equals 3x plus 8. I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And so I'm going to get negative 10 equals 3x. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And so x equals a negative 10 thirds. So I'm going to save that negative 10 thirds as well. And then I'm going to check them. So I've got two answers to check, the negative 10 thirds and the negative 6/5. Okay, so I'm going to erase this and we're going to check them from the original problem that was given. Okay. I got erased a little bit. Okay, so this was the original that I was given. So now I'm going to plug in x. Okay, so let's do the pink one first. Okay, so the pink one is that negative 10 thirds. So I'm going to say the absolute value of negative 10 thirds minus 2 is equal to 4 times that negative 10 thirds again, plus 8. And it's okay to use the calculator here if you want to get a decimal. And so if you do negative 10 thirds as a decimal, you get negative 3.3 repeatedly. And then if I subtract 2 from that, I'm going to get negative 5.3. Okay, And then the absolute value, though, of that, because this is inside the absolute value, is going to be a positive 5.3. Okay? And now I've got to do the right side. Okay? And so on this side, again, we said that the 10 over 3, the negative 10 thirds, is that negative 3.3. And then we're going to multiply that by 4. And so that's going to give me a negative 13.33 plus 8. And so I have a negative 13, right, plus 8. That's going to give me a negative 5.3, repeating. But you'll notice on this side, there's no absolute value, so it gets left like that. And so the question is, does 5.3 equal a negative 5.3? The answer is no. These do not equal each other. One of them is positive and one of them is negative. And so in this case, that means this is an extraneous solution, which means it lied to us, right? It doesn't work. So that is not a solution. That negative 10 thirds is not a true solution. Okay? You still need to check the other one, though. So we had another one. We had a negative 6/5. So let's check that one. Okay? So we're going to go back to the original problem, and we're going to try the other side. Okay. So for the other one, we had a negative 6/5 for x. So I'm just plugging that in right now. Okay. And again, if we wanted decimal, that's okay here, because a negative 6/5 is going to be a negative 1.2. Okay. And then we still have minus 2. So this gives me a negative 3.2. But I have an absolute value, and so the negative actually becomes a positive 3.2. And then we need to do the other side of the equal sign. Okay? So the other side, again, the negative 6/5 is a negative 1.2 times 4 gives me a negative 4.8 plus 8. And that actually gives me a positive 3.2. And so because they match, the negative 6/5 is indeed a solution.